Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video on my channel. Tonight there are finally better conditions for astrophotography. So as you can see in the background, there are no clouds and the conditions are good tonight. There will be no moon, so the moon is not visible, which means that we will achieve dark skies tonight, which is very important in order to capture these deep scale objects with astrophotography equipment. Tonight I'm planning to go for a smaller setup. So usually I'm using my bigger telescope, my bigger mount, and my cooled dedicated astrophotography camera. But tonight I'm planning to go for a very portable setup that is easy to use, which is the perfect setup for these long cold winter nights. So before introducing the entire setup and before talking about the plans for tonight, I'm planning to mention that this video is not sponsored, I'm not being paid for it, and all products shown in this video were purchased by myself. But now let's get started with this video. So first of all, I would like to introduce the entire setup to you. So the mount that I'm planning to use tonight is a very portable one, so it's in Star Tracker, which is the iOptron SkyGuider Pro. So the iOptron SkyGuider Pro is a very portable star tracker that is perfect for astrophotography trips, and it's also great if you're just planning to capture the night sky for just a few hours, and therefore I'm planning to use this setup tonight. So I've attached this adapter that allows me to use heavier equipment on this star tracker. So at the front I've also attached a counterweight, which is important for balancing the entire setup later on. Here we go. Let's bring it in the right position once again. So here we go. And on the top I've attached my portable telescope. So not my bigger telescope. The scope that I'm planning to use tonight is the Askar SQA55 telescope, which is a very portable telescope that is well suited for wide field astrophotography. That's why I've decided to go for this telescope for tonight. That's definitely a great telescope. It has a focal length of only 264 millimeters, which is great for some wide field images. For sure, when planning to photograph galaxies, I'm planning to use my bigger telescope, but for those wide field projects such as the Orion Constellation, this telescope is definitely well suited. That's why I'm planning to use that one for tonight. As you can see, I've not attached a guiding system to this setup, but I really hope that this is not a problem tonight. So tonight there is no wind, which is very important as well when using such a small star tracker. At the back of this telescope I've attached a camera, a DSLR camera to be more precise. So I'm not planning to use my cooler dedicated astrophotography camera, which is the CWO ASI533 MC Pro. I've decided to go for this camera because I'm planning to capture a very wide field image of the Orion Constellation tonight. And actually no, when photographing the Orion Constellation and when planning to include multiple nebulae in just one single image, we have to capture mosaic images, or we are using a telescope with a shorter focal length. I've decided to go for the second option. So I'm planning to use a telescope with a shorter focal length in combination with a full-frame camera, which helps me to really achieve a wide field of view, which is what I'm planning to do tonight. So I'm planning to use this DSLR camera. It's the Canon EOS 6DA, so it's the astro-modified version of the Canon EOS 6D, but that's very important because generally speaking, when planning to use DSLR cameras for astrophotography, it's quite helpful using the astro-modified version of the camera because that's better for collecting good images of these H-alpha regions, and that's what I'm planning to do tonight. So there's a lot of H-alpha in the Orion Constellation, therefore using an astro-modified DSLR camera is definitely a big advantage over these normal DSLR cameras. So as I've mentioned, it's a full-frame camera which allows me to capture an even wider region of the night sky. So later on I'm planning to use an exposure time of, I guess, 30 seconds or 1 minute. So using the relatively short exposure time is not due to just using a star tracker, it's due to the aspect that the Orion Nebula is a very bright object in the night sky. And when using an exposure time of, let's say, 5 minutes, then we are losing a lot of structures, colors, and details in the center of the Orion Nebula. Because the center of the Orion Nebula is very bright, and when using a long exposure time, the center will become so bright that we cannot see any structures in the center of this nebula. Therefore, I'm planning to go for a shorter exposure time, and that's definitely quite good as well because I am definitely using the maximum payload capacity of this star tracker tonight. Therefore, using an exposure time of 5 minutes is not a good idea. That's for sure. So additionally, I'm planning to attach this remote shutter release cable to the camera, which allows me to capture multiple images tonight. So later on, I have to select the amount of images I'd like to have, the exposure time, the time between the different images. So all of that stuff that's important for me in order to have multiple images later on. So the Orion Constellation will be in this area. So later on I'll have to do the polar alignment process on this star tracker, which means I have to align the star tracker to Polaris, which is the North Star. But then I have to focus the camera, the telescope, adjust the settings on the camera, such as the exposure time, the ISO value, all of that stuff. And then I'm planning to put in the settings into this remote shutter release cable. Then I'm planning to start the astrophotography session. Hopefully I can collect an exposure time of 2 to 4 hours depending on the conditions. Tonight maybe I'm planning to collect more exposure time next week, but we'll see that definitely later on when really using this setup for astrophotography. So that's everything I've planned to mention so far about this setup. So in the end of this video you will hopefully see a good and amazing image of the Orion Constellation. So see you later. That night I was able to collect data of the Orion Constellation. Nevertheless, I had a few problems when planning to capture these objects that night. So first of all, the objects were quite low to the horizon, so lower than I expected, and therefore I had to look for a place where I can actually capture these objects. Therefore at the beginning I had to look for a place where I can actually set up my equipment. After stacking and combining all of the images I've captured, I was able to create this image. So this image has a total exposure time of 2.5 hours. To be honest, I had a lot of problems that night. So on the one side, as I mentioned, the object was quite low to the horizon. On the other side, the object was quite close to the light pollution of the city. So usually I'm capturing objects in another direction, but this time I had to capture these objects in that direction because they were so low, and unfortunately there was a lot of light pollution in that direction, and therefore I had to adjust the brightness of these different regions in the image, because I've captured a wide field image, and therefore for sure not all regions in the image do have the exact same brightness. Another problem I had that night was dealing with the wind. So it was quite windy, and as you know, I've set up the iOptron SkyGuider Pro, which is for sure a star tracker, and therefore wind might be challenging. Nevertheless, I was able to capture a single exposure time of 30 seconds. So generally speaking, I am quite happy with this image. For sure the total exposure time is not that long, so when collecting a long exposure time, for sure more details might become visible. If you have any further questions about the image I've captured, or about the equipment I've used, or about the camera, the lens, all of that stuff, feel free to ask me down below in the comments, and I will definitely help you. If you would like to further support me, you can now become a member of my channel. Becoming a member of my channel would really support me, and your support really means a lot to me. If this video was interesting and helpful to you, I would really appreciate a like and a subscription. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, clear skies, Felix.